We are feeling a little presidential here on Monday. I don't know.
It's the last word I would use to describe us.
The fans heard Justin Kinney was in town. They packed the Coliseum. Unfortunately, he's not going to be there. It's just going to be the President of the United States. So we're doing it from the new set, talking about a lot of football this week because it's regional championship week.
Yes.
We've got 5 teams alive, 4 games to look at this Friday. We're going to start in 6A. You know, how crazy the regular season was, the SAC specifically, and then if you take a look at who we've got alive this week, if you'd have told me Snyder, Angola, Dwenger, Luers, and Adams Central are your last team standing back in August, I'd have been like, yeah, that sounds about right. That's about right.
Yeah, despite all the craziness that was the SAC week after week, and we sat here every week and was going, oh my gosh, what's going to happen this week? We're back in regional week. We're Snyder, Dwenger, Luers, as we are most years.
Pretty much the way that things have played out for the last few seasons. And, you know, in 6A, you've got Snyder versus Carmel. This is a classic matchup. These programs know each other. Carmel has had the upper hand specifically last year in a game that I know Snyder thinks that they should have won. They were up 21-7 at one point, I believe, heading into the fourth quarter.
Yes.
Carmel gets 2 touchdowns and a safety in the fourth quarter to win by 1 point. If you're Snyder, what do you take away from that game that you can apply this time around?
Well, you know you compete with Carmel, and I think Snyder knows that, but it's still reinforcing that point that you can play a power out of Indianapolis and compete with them. But I think the message out of Snyder coaching staff this week is last year was last year, and we need to focus on this year. There was a tale of 2 games last week. They did not look good in the first half last week against Snyder or against Homestead. Came back, played tremendously well in the second half to win.
That was what I was going to lead into next is, you know, at halftime when I'm scrolling through the scores on my phone, I'm like, oh, we may be thinking Homestead Carmel next week.
Yeah.
That was not the case. 49-35 Snyder. They put it on them, tied it up in the third quarter, and then just crushed them kind of in the fourth quarter. This is not a Carmel team you want to be down multiple touchdowns to at any point in the game. Point being, they were down to Lafayette Jeff last week and then came back and beat them 41-21.
Well, I saw that score 14-0, and I said, ooh, okay. And then you saw Carmel score and score again, and you're like, okay, that was cute. Lafayette Jeff is done. That was cute. Kind of what Snyder did to Homestead last week in the second half. Okay, you've had your fun. We're going to start playing football now. But, yeah, you know, Bo Robbins on the defensive end for Carmel, IU commit, is just as good of an edge rusher as Snyder will have seen all season long. It'll be interesting to see how that front 7 in particular of Carmel matches up with Snyder's offensive front.
All right, let's move on to 4A, where for the second year in a row we've got Angola versus Bishop Dwenger. Last year it was up at Angola and Dwenger dominated. There's no other way to say it. 34-0. If you're Andy Thomas, what do you draw from that? And if you're Jason Garrett, who's now at a head coaching position at Dwenger, what do you take from that so your team doesn't go in overconfident against an Angola team that I don't know if you could say they're definitively better or worse than last year's team, but different in terms of their strength. I think their defense is a little bit stronger.
I think they're different in that they know what to expect, being undefeated and have a target on your back and playing in a good sectional and beating some very good teams, of course, beating Northwood last week, and what it takes to compete with Bishop Dwenger. I don't think they really understood what they needed to do last year. Now they know what they need to do. The question is, can they do it against Bishop Dwenger? And I think we've seen, including last week against Wayne, Dwenger looking downright pedestrian, particularly offensively. So you look at an Angola team and say, how do they match up? I think you can comparatively look and say Angola maybe have some edges in certain parts of the game than what you would say against a traditional Dwenger team.
Here's my thing with Angola. They're down 26-15 against a really good Northwood team, a Northwood team with Bronson Yoder there that broke a couple of big plays. They can run the football. It doesn't look good. And then they turn things around in the fourth quarter. It wasn't just the offense. The defense made a couple of huge fourth down stops, you know, in that fourth quarter.
Yeah.
It was a complete team effort. It wasn't just a star or 2 stars making plays. It was complete Angola team effort last week.
Yeah, and stopping Bronson Yoder, obviously, in that 4th and short, and it was huge late in the game. I think the issue here with Angola is similar to Snyder. You cannot fall behind a couple touchdowns to Dwenger because you're not coming back if you're Angola. You need to keep this game close, maybe an early score. I think Angola can get enough defensive stops to win this game. It's how that Angola offense operates against a Dwenger defense that I think is better than they were a year ago, and they shut out Angola in the regional last year.
And one of the scary things I think you also see is we knew that the week 1 game against Wayne, the weather kind of slowed down. The Lambos, as you will say, Derek Moore will say, for the Wayne Generals, the speed guys, the athletes that they had on the outside. But last week they held him to 13 points. A missed PAT, very crucial as it always seems to be in a close game like that. But if you're Bishop Dwenger, you almost saw your season ended. It could have very well ended last week. I don't think you're going to have a problem of overlooking Angola, even though you beat them 34-0 last year.
No, what was it? Less than 15 total yards in the first half. No first downs. They had one completion the entire game, which was a touchdown, which was huge, obviously. But yeah, it's looking at. We talked about Brendan Lytle being that guy at quarterback. How can he play on the New Haven turf, getting some things going vertically? I think that is the key. I like Dwenger here. I don't think it's as emphatic of a win as it was a year ago. I still think Dwenger's a better football team.
What is it that makes them better, in your opinion?
I think the defensive unit that they're able to put on the field, they're able to put pressure on teams, really able to limit teams' playmakers. We saw it last week against Wayne, and I think we'll see it again against Angola.
The one thing I like about Angola is different guys step up every week. It comes with big plays, whether it's Tagliaferri, Nicholas Ferreri's favorite player, or last week it was Jake Honer doing it offensively and defensively. We've seen Gibson. We've seen a number of guys, so it's been fun to watch. I think it'll be an entertaining game. It'll be our highlight zone game of the week. You got two local teams battling.
Yeah, and credit to Gibson because he was in a quarterback battle to begin the year to replace Chance Roddy, who was an all-time great at Angola, and for a guy that had to battle for the job. And now is making big play after big play. We saw it last week. I mean, a commendable job because so many people wanted to talk about, well, without Chance Roddy, where does this team go? Gibson's been tremendous for him, filling in and replacing a legend.
In 3A, this is another matchup, much like the Snyder-Carmel matchup, where I think
another rematch. Right?
Our local team has been looking forward to a rematch like this because last year it was at Lewis Field. Mishawaka Marion came in and pretty well handled Bishop Lewis. It was 30-7. The Brock kid at quarterback had a big game. He's a dual threat guy to watch again this season with more seasoning under his belt. How do you see this one playing out at Lewis Field? 7:30 kick on Friday night.
Whitfield and Hemingway also had good games for Mishawaka Marion last year. They're gone. Brock is back, as you mentioned, a true dual threat guy. And, Bishop Lewis just got manhandled last year. This is a Mishawaka Marion team that's not flashy. They're going to come out and they're going to run 4 or 5 yards at a time. And they're happy doing it, and they're going to eat 7, 8, 9 minutes off the clock. So when you look at a team in Marion, similar to like playing Navy, you're going to have limited possessions, right? And Lures is going to have to maximize those possessions. That's going to be the key thing, I think, Friday.
Belmont gave Lures a game last week, and we've talked quite a bit over the last couple of weeks about how crazy it's been for Belmont to go, winless in the regular season and to kick it up here in the playoffs. But 27-14. The one thing that really stuck out to me, though, is that Norman Kanapke to Nate Moore is a pretty good combination. 3 touchdowns, some amazing catches. We've talked about Kanapke. He's got the big numbers, but a lot of it has been off screens, yards after the catch from Jordan Presley, Justin Gaston. But it seems like with Moore, he has a downfield target and a guy that has now proven himself. Concordia would obviously concur.
Yeah.
He had a big catch in overtime in the regular season. But I feel like their offense is becoming even more versatile as time wears on, and that can only be a problem for Mishawaka Marion.
So many weapons across the field, and you have Kanapke, a year older from a year ago, that I think can make a lot of plays in the passing game. And when we go forward and people want to talk and bring up Player of the Year candidates, Norman Kanapke is definitely in the conversation, and with every round that Lures advances, we'll get a bigger and bigger kind of a spotlight on him for that award. I mean, he's thrown over 2,600 yards, 30 touchdowns as a senior. But the kid has been a phenomenal to get the ball in the hands of his playmakers, and I think that's the key for Bishop Lures. Again, Jordan Presley back this year. Again, last year was hurt in the second offensive possession of this game and didn't see play the rest of the game. Was it concussion
or neck?
It was some sort of neck thing.
Something you don't want to mess with.
Yeah, whatever it was. It took him out of that game. And he was a real dual two-way guy last year. Played a lot of defense.
3-way guy
with special teams. Yeah, so the playmaker that is Jordan Presley back for Bishop Lures, the revenge factor too. This has a lot of intrigue going into Friday.
The one thing that, if I'm Kyle Lindsey, the one thing that sticks out to me is, so Mishawaka Marion won last week. They beat Macconaquah 35-7. But Mishawaka Marion only had 21 plays from scrimmage. They were big, like their first, I believe it was their first play from scrimmage was like a 71-yard run.
Yeah.
I mean, they were chunk yardage touchdowns. I know that historically, like you were saying, they're kind of a grinded out team. But last week against Macconaquah, man, they just took them to the woodshed, play after play after play. 21 snaps for 35 points.
That's a big concern because if there's one weakness with Bishop Luers throughout this year, it's been the defense, right? I mean, they're playing better as of late, but this is still a team that was just run all over by teams. Northside, you remember that game, some other games they just gave up huge amounts of yards on the ground. And then you're looking at a Mishawaka-Marion team that predominantly moves the ball on the ground or scores on the ground. So, you know, where's that Luers defense? I think that's going to be huge, obviously, particularly up front as winning those battles because, yeah, 4, 5, 6 yards is Marion's kind of MO, but they can also score on long touchdowns, which the Luers defense has been susceptible to giving up this season.
Moving on to 1A, we've given Adams Central a lot of credit this season, but I don't know if we've given them enough credit because the way they beat Churubusco, then the way they handled Southwood last week, 38-0. I mean, it's just been impressive.
It was a beatdown. I mean, I think we all expected Adams Central to win last week, but to be up 31-0 at halftime and 38-0 win was just shocking as any score we've seen all season long because of the resume that Southwood was able to bring into that game. They were solid offensively. The defense was just stopping everyone. And for Adams Central to come in and just lay the wood on them on both sides of the ball was tremendous and impressive.
Adams Central, Monroe Central, not exactly strangers. 15-12 2016. Adams Central winning over the Golden Bears. Monroe Central, what kind of threat do they present, knowing that we've seen Adams Central do it offensively, we've seen them do it defensively? They've got Bailey Sprunger kicking it on special teams. They're doing whatever they want on the football field right now. I
think the only thing you have to guard against if you're Adams Central, and it's the same thing that we do, is not looking ahead to that Pioneer matchup in semi-state, because I think that's what has a lot of people's attention. Pioneer's just been demolishing teams. Adams Central looks so good. It's a little bit of a trap game in a lot of respects. I don't think Monroe Central can beat Adams Central. I think the only team that can beat Adams Central on Friday is Adams Central.
Well, one of the biggest concerns, Monroe Central's had a lot of injuries from what I've read this season, so they've dealt with a lot of guys filling in at positions, but Seth Wilson rushed it 21 times for 116 yards, 3 touchdowns last week for Monroe Central. So stopping the Monroe Central ground game will be Adams Central's #1 priority, considering they faced teams like Southwood who love to run it, Busco, who we know is going to run it. They're well prepared to face what Monroe Central presents.
Yes, I think it's strength against strength, too, because Adams Central has seen a lot of that in this road to the regional game, as you mentioned, Churubusco, Southwood. So a team that predominantly runs the football, I think, fits into what Adams Central likes to do defensively. I don't think there's very many teams at the 1A level that can run against Adams Central, and I don't think Monroe Central can.
To wrap things up, 5 teams alive this week. Only 5 teams winning a sectional title from our area. That seems like the lowest total. I don't have any numbers in front of me, but it seems like the lowest total we've had in a few years. Out of these 5 teams, who do you see as most likely to make a run to state?
To state? Wow, that's tough. I'm going with Bishop Luers.
Really?
Yes. Because I think it's more because of what the other teams have to face. I think Bishop Luers has a great chance, don't get me wrong. Adams Central, that Pioneer team scares me. I think they're so good. 6A is difficult with Snyder, and I think the winner of the regional between Bishop Dwenger and Angola has another level to go to where they'll have to play a very tough team. I think Bishop Luers, I think they have the talent. If they can get the defensive stops, which they've gotten in the last several weeks, I think they got a great shot.
I thought you would go with Bishop Dwenger. 4A seems to be, when you map it out year in and year out, 4A seems to be the area most likely, because I think you take a look outside the state, you're either a small school or you're a big school in Indianapolis, and 4A is kind of that in-between where you can get in there, and if you're playing good football, you can make a run if you're a team from Northeast Indiana. I don't want to say it's easy. I just want to say the path makes the most sense.
Yeah, it's just terrifying to me for Bishop Dwenger, that offense.
Well, see,
I mean, it's just...
I kept thinking Northwood is the team to beat out of this.
Yeah, area. And Angola took care of business,
Angola took care of business. So now I'm like, okay, whoever wins this, I like.
But then again, I mean, what team in 4A in the North has the amount of athletes that Wayne has, and Dwenger was able to beat them? Now, it wasn't pretty, particularly offensively, but they were able to make the plays when they needed to. It seemed like every time Wayne scored last Friday, Dwenger was like, okay, now we're going to put together a drive. Now we're going to score. And then when they tied it at 7, then they kind of went into hibernation a little bit. And then Wayne scored, and Dwenger was like, okay, offense, you got to do something again. They go down and score, kick the extra point. They do just enough to win football games. That scares me, though.
Yeah, well, and at this point, you can't misfire any of those opportunities, or else, boom, you're dead in the water.
Yeah.
All right, well, we will wrap it up here for this week's edition of Inside the Zone from the set. Our presidential-looking sportscast. We'll be back next week talking about semi-state.
How about that?
That's crazy.
Let's do it.
All right. He's Justin. I'm Glenn. We'll see you next week.